In this video we go looking for a British bird that's numbers have dwindled so much it's now red listed. We also do some urban birding looking for a controversial exotic bird that's made the UK its home. Hello everybody. We've got a car full this time.
School holidays.
School holidays, yeah. We're heading out to some local high moorland that I'm not actually going to mention where it is because there might be some sensitive species there. We hope to add to our year list. Stick with us, let's go and have a look. This mini adventure started with a reasonably short drive to some pretty local high moorland. When we arrived, the weather was pretty mixed, with some clouds, some sun trying to peek through, but reasonably high winds. This piece of moorland has some single track roads, and most of the birding we do from the car. It didn't take us long to find our first bird, which is probably the most abundant species in this environment, the meadow pipit. There were a number of these birds all along the edges of the road, feeding and trying to fly, battling the wind, landing on top of the heather. Another species, which I mistook for meadow pipit at first, was this skylark. We did hear more singing as the day went on. These birds are generally seen from a distance, so it was really nice to see this one so close up. Travelling further along the road, I saw a shape on the top of a hill. This was our first spring visitor, the wheatear. This pretty little bird is one of the first species back in the spring, which is amazing considering the journey they make. These birds breed all around the top of the northern hemisphere, Canada, Alaska, Europe, Scandinavia and Russia, but every single one of these birds migrate to Africa in the winter, and that's a long journey for such a small bird. So we were really pleased that this one had returned back safely, ready for breeding. These high moorlands are quite synonymous with grouse, and the most common being the red grouse, like this one. There was a reasonably good number of this species along the roads. Some were out in the open, but most of them were in the heather with just their heads poking out. Although they're reasonably well camouflaged, you certainly hear them, and they make a very interesting noise, a bit like a ruler on the side of a table. This species of grouse is pretty widely hunted in the UK in these type of environments. The other species of grouse, which really shouldn't be hunted because it's red listed, is the bird we were looking for, the black grouse. And this particular area is reasonably reliable to see them. Springtime and usually early in the morning, the black grouse males get together in sites that are called lekking sites. This usually happens in an open area where there's very low vegetation. The act of lekking is where the males assert dominance over each other, with the higher ranking males being in the middle of the lek, and the younger, less experienced ones being on the outskirts. These birds do challenge each other by displaying and sometimes running at each other, and on occasions actually fighting. These leks go on daily for weeks until about mid-May, when the females grace the males with their presence. As previously mentioned, these birds are red listed, which means they're protected. That's the reason I've been reasonably vague about their whereabouts. Disturbing this species during breeding season is illegal, and all the footage I have taken is from the car. It's a real privilege having these beautiful birds so close to home. Strangely, amongst all of these lekking males running about and fighting, there was a Canada goose sat down, minding its own business. By now the road was taking us gradually off of the mountaintop, seeing en route this wonderful buzzard which flew past us and landed. I was a little slow with the camera to get the close-up, and by the time I got the camera the bird had relocated. But I found it again, sat on a branch on the hillside. Wonderful. When we came off of the mountain, in some of the farmland nearby, there was a few birds, including this wonderful pied wagtail. And as a rain cloud came over, ironically, there was another sign of spring, a singing willow warbler. This species is astonishingly similar in appearance to another spring visitor, the chiff-chaff. These birds were in our previous video. The most striking difference between the two species is the song, and this individual was really showing that off. Passing a small stream, we did get a brief glimpse of a dipper, but unfortunately I was too slow to get footage, so we'll have to try for that one again. One bird we did see on the edge of the stream was this lovely singing goldcrest, which is the joint smallest bird in the UK. And although small in stature, they have a pretty big voice. And not only that, another bird for our year list. We were nearly at the end of this particular trip when we had to stop as this hare ran out in front of us, which in itself is lovely to see, and things started to get better as the sun came out. Unfortunately though, we had to head home and settle down, much like this grey-lag goose we passed on the way back. Today, it was a much different type of journey, into Manchester for some urban birding. Hey folks, we're all at Manchester Fog Lane Park in Didsbury, looking for a species of birds that is kind of introduced or escaped, which have formed a self-sustaining population. Stick with us, let's see if we can find it. Our first stop was Fog Lane Park in Didsbury. This is synonymous with a bird which is a little bit controversial. More about that shortly. Our first port of call was the duck pond, where many birds were coming down and being fed by passers-by. On the duck pond itself, there were a few waterfowl, there were quite a few Canada geese, and amongst the Canada geese, the duck pond favourite, the mallard. On a little island towards the middle of the pool, there was a big nest being sat on by a coot. This individual was carefully looking after its eggs, occasionally being bothered by the Canada geese. There was one bird here that had already hatched its babies. This lovely female mallard appeared to have 7 young. This cute little family were on a little island in the middle of the pool, but quickly came over towards us as they realised food was being thrown. These chicks must only be a few days old and are super cute, feeding on the seed thrown by the passers-by. A duck I didn't expect to see here was the mandarin. This stunning exotic duck from the east used to be domesticated in the UK, but some escaped and have got self-sustaining populations. I'd never seen them at this location before, but I did count 4 males and 1 female. Although this is a beautiful exotic bird that has made Britain its home, it wasn't the one I was looking for. The other one was a bit noisier. The ring-necked or rose-ringed parakeets are natives of India and Africa, with these specific ones apparently being of Indian descent. Although it isn't completely clear how the UK population began, it could be escaped birds or even released birds. Nevertheless, they're certainly here and have been around for about 50 years now, with a reasonably large increase in population since the 1990s. There is no doubt these birds are very pretty and quite an interesting bird to see flying around in the wilds of northern England. Regardless of this species has certainly sparked controversy and posed questions about their effect on native species. One definite is due to the size of the birds and the fact that they're pretty smart, they certainly dominate bird feeders. As for monopolising the nest holes that might otherwise be used by native species, it's a tricky one, as the parrots nest an awful lot earlier than most other species that use similar nest sites, like woodpeckers and nuthatch. The parrots generally choose to nest in January or February, unlike the other species mentioned who nest later on in the spring. Regardless of all of these arguments, it's reasonably early days to know, with the parrots only being around for about 50 years, and studies so far not seeing any significant impact to UK wildlife. We will have to see what the future brings, but they're certainly here to stay, and now being considered as a naturalised British species, another one for our year list. Fantastic. These lovely green parrots may or may not be a pest, but this certainly is a pest, the brown rat. We saw this as we headed out of Fog Lane Park. Our next stop, Chorlton Water Park. As we parked up in the car park near the bird feeders, our controversial friend had followed us. There was a male parrot feeding on the peanuts in the feeder. Soon enough, it was joined by a female who waited very patiently until the feeder was available. We all had our own picnic and then headed down to the water itself to see what other birds were about. Detective Kaylee there.
It's Lily's hat.
It's Lily's hat. We're at Chiltern Water Park and there's lots of tame birds here taking seeds off me. Pigeons and such, and geese. Seen another parrot, that's quite good. We're going to have a look round and see what else there is. Join us. As we got to the bank, there was loads of birds waiting to be fed. We had brought with us some bird seed, and this very quickly made me very popular. There was a large amount of pigeons here. These birds surrounded me, jumping over and squabbling to try and get the seed, occasionally being interrupted by a Canada goose, which came and fed out of my hand. When the Canada goose went, the pigeons came closer, some even jumping on my hand to get the opportunity to feed. And I even fed the leftovers of a sandwich to an extremely large swan. But it was now time to move on and have a walk around the lake. Eagle-eyed Kaylee spotted something unusual on the far bank at a distance. This happened to be a pair of goosander that were roosting. Moving further around the lake, there was a ubiquitous robin, this one singing at us. And on the water, there was a few birds, including this herring gull. It was one of two of this species that were taking advantage of passers-by's scraps and picnic leftovers. Other birds on the water included this wonderful great-crested grebe. I did get a brief view of a long-tailed tit in the hedge beside me, and a quite unusual view looking through this hedge at these two Canada geese that appeared to be fishing with fishing rods. That's definitely a first for me. Befuddled by this odd occurrence, we carried on walking round, seeing some more ducks on the water, like this group of sleeping tufted duck. Obviously this individual couldn't nod off. As we almost made full circle of the lake, the sun came out briefly, giving us lovely views over the reed bed, spotting this coot that was swimming towards the edge. Heading back towards the car park, we looked in the hedges and on the ground, seeing this blackbird that was foraging under some bushes, picking up bits of food on the way. Arriving back at the car park, there was still plenty of birds around, like this lovely wood pigeon that was sitting in a particularly beautiful blossom tree. A little further along in a neighbouring tree, there was this carrion crow that had just flown up after picking up some food off the ground. And as we were about to leave, I spotted a pair of birds that are reasonably common, so unusual to be such late arrivals on our year list. This was a pair of collared dove that were billing and cooing in a tree just above the car. It looks like, if they haven't already, they'll be building a nest soon. What a lovely sign of spring and a great way to end our little adventure. Thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and please press the notification bell. See you for the next adventure.